I just want to convey something real quick before we get into this episode. There's been a lot of talk in the news, not as much as I think there should be, of human trafficking. So there's an event that's coming up, like I said, on August 12th at the Marriott Shoals Conference Center in Florence, Alabama. It's the second annual Fight for Freedom benefit for Holos Hope. Holos Hope is a nonprofit organization in Florence whose mission is to provide hope and healing to women who have lived through human trafficking and addiction. It empowers them to find their purpose and live in freedom. They support women on their journey to emotional, physical, and spiritual wholeness by providing safe housing, therapy, employment, and more. Holos Hope is currently supporting 4 survivors. All proceeds from the Fight for Freedom benefit will go towards funding the Holos Hope 2-year residential program. Rebecca Bender, who will be speaking at this event, is a survivor of trafficking and is the CEO and founder of Elevate Academy. Kaylee McEnany will be the keynote speaker. She's the former White House press secretary and current co-host of Outnumbered on Fox. Again, if you're interested in attending this event, it's on August 12th at 7 p.m. at the Marriott Conference Center in Florence, Alabama. You can purchase your tickets on their website, holoshope.org. That's HOLOS, hope.org. They're still looking for another business sponsor, so if you're able to fill that role, I'd encourage you to do so. If you're not able to attend this event, but you would like to support them, please consider making a donation. They're always grateful for volunteers, and they have a shopping list as well. We will put more information down in the description. Thank you, and let's help end human trafficking.
Good day, listeners. Welcome to Mish Men. I'm your host today, Adam Mauser, and to my immediate right is my co-host, Mr. Dustin Labar.
Hello and good day, everybody.
So we are excited to be with you once again. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. We enjoy talking about all of these various and sundry topics. We hope you do too. Please give us that feedback. We enjoy it. And we enjoy the fact that people are tuning in and listening, and our viewership is, not our viewership, but our listenership and our the folks that subscribe. It seems to be growing.
Yeah, our subscribers.
So if you are a subscriber, please hit the notification bell. That's always good on YouTube.
Yep.
And just continue to listen. And I've got one promotional to give, one of our sponsors for this room, and just the helps us out with T-shirt sales is CrossFit. Not CrossFit Invigorate.
It's good
Well,
enough.
them too.
Yeah, also CrossFit Invigorate.
A shout out to CrossFit Invigorate. But Charlie Mike Never Weaken, they are a T-shirt printer, and they make a lot of the shirts the shirts that we're wearing, and hopefully you are wearing around the house when you're listening to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They do shirts for family reunions, for work. They do shirts for CrossFit competitions. They do T-shirts just because you like.
I asked for something and it's stupid, and they get it anyway.
Yeah, like I'm going to order one shirt and it has a picture of a Subway sandwich and it says, "Adam's sandwiches are the best." Well, there you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like you've seen me wear the Musk versus Zuckerberg shirt.
Yeah.
That was a fresh Charlie Mike Never Weaken shirt. They do lots of different fun stuff. They have our Mishmash Men shirts.
That's right.
They have Reaching for the Bar, our RFTB Studios, Reaching for the Bar podcast. They do a multitude of different things, and I think you're only limited by your imagination.
That's right. And they'll help you out with design stuff. So very good. So I'm sorry, I did it again.
You may as well keep CrossFit Invigorate.
CrossFit Invigorate, great gym, and Charlie Mike Never Weaken.
Yep.
So today's episode is on propaganda.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on propaganda?
What pops into your head is definitely like in Nazi Germany.
Sure.
Was when they had a propagandist, Goebbels.
Yeah.
Goebbels.
Yep.
Who basically was spinning certain information that, would make the Nazi regime look like heroes,
right,
and everybody outside of that look like villains. So to get the country on their side, basically. So they were feeding them what they wanted them to hear, not exactly what was going on. That's kind of what pops in the head when you think of propaganda.
You hit on the key elements there. The key elements. Well done.
Well, I do my best.
Yeah. So I'm going to read you a book definition. It's dissemination of information or ideas aimed at influencing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of a target audience, often with a biased or misleading intent.
Mm-hmm.
So exactly what you're talking about. Exactly what you're talking about. So the question I had in my mind is, okay, so that's what propaganda is. How do I differentiate that from just regular information like books or newspapers or broadcast news or whatever? So how do I differentiate that? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. I've got a couple.
Right now, I don't know how you differentiate that sometimes besides you doing your own research or going to news sources or things that you view as trusted sources to get, or look at different sides and kind of come up with your own truth of what's going on.
Yeah, kind of research on your own.
Research on your own, yep.
Yeah, that's a healthy attitude to take, especially these days because it seems to be difficult to discern. But so what a propagandist outfit will do is they use emotional appeals, exaggerations, or selective info. So just like you were talking about with Goebbels, highlighting the things that put the organization that he wants to favor in a good light and diminishing that which puts them in a bad light.
Correct, yeah.
And suppress any dissenting opinions.
Yep.
And it's designed to manipulate emotions.
Yep.
That's the whole point of it.
Like, for instance, when they said that Kim Jong-il shot an 18 at 18 holes of golf.
Yeah.
That's propaganda.
That is propaganda.
Yeah, that guy didn't actually, that's almost impossible.
Right.
I guess.
You could, I guess, on a,
my God.
that's amazing.
Yeah. I guess that's wrong of me to say that he didn't do it. I wasn't there. I'm assuming he didn't.
That's true.
But he definitely poops. They said he didn't poop.
Yeah.
He pooped.
So on that note, so is it always bad, though? Because we've described Goebbels, we described North Korea's propaganda outfit.
Yeah.
Is it always bad?
I don't think it's always bad. I think, but we have a negative thought on it because of what has happened in the past, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a negative twist to it, generally speaking, but I don't necessarily think it has to be negative. Although I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head that I could use as positive.
Well, when we walk the dog,
Yeah.
there might be some aspects that could be considered a useful use of propaganda.
Okay.
But we'll walk through it, and then at the end I'll ask the question again.
Okay.
So the basic types of propaganda, you have appeal to emotion. Now already when you see appeal to emotion, you're already thinking, if you recall some of our previous podcasts, we had cognitive biases, we had a thing on logic. And so there's these things that okay, well, automatically, if I'm appealing to emotion, is that like a logical fallacy? Is that troublesome?
Yeah.
And I'd say it can be.
Sure.
And it depends on intent, and it always boils down to intent, the intent of the propagandist.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Yeah, if the propagandist is trying to do ill, then it's probably a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. So appeal to emotion, and that's where you're going to use fear, love, etc., or patriotism.
Patriotism, yeah. I was going to say patriotism.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in some of the classic examples.
Yep.
The bandwagon effect. Okay, so if you don't follow this crowd, then you're going to be out. You're not going to be part of the group.
Yeah, or killed.
Or killed.
Yeah.
But that's more of a threat than propaganda.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Name calling. So that's one of the fallacies that we talked about a couple months ago. Ad hominem attacks. So if you're just name calling someone, but it's in order to diminish somebody else. And if you think of political ads, that's kind of political ads. Those are pure propaganda.
Yeah, that's right. That's fair.
Testimonials, and that's to gain trust. So you have a trusted. Like Jimmy Fallon says that we should do this. Well, I trust Jimmy Fallon because he tells jokes for a living and he makes me laugh. So I should trust him and follow his medical advice.
Yeah, he has to know what he's talking about.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Plain folks. Okay, you see this around.
Plain folks?
As in, like normal folks.
Normal guys, okay.
You see this around, especially because the presidential elections are so pronounced and they're so ad heavy. But during election season, you see these ads, and inevitably, it doesn't matter if it's a state senator or a local representative or whatever, you see them in some sort of, I would call it farm gear, like jeans and a plaid shirt.
Yeah.
Throwing the football with his kids out out near some pasture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, Joe Biden used to dig coal for a living.
Yeah.
He's got an axe. He's at coal mines.
Do you recall the John Kasich? He was a representative from Ohio, and he was running for president during the 2012, I think it was.
Kasich, no, it doesn't.
And his dad was a mailman, and he talked about his dad being a mailman like ad nauseum. It was just over and over and over again. Right. He would just drag out that during any of the debates. He would drag out his dad, who used to be a mailman. It was just like, it was tiresome after a while.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the other ones were trying to compete when they had like 8 up on the stage talking, and there was someone made reference to the four Yorkshiremen, which is a funny Monty Python skit where they try to outdo each other on how humble humble beginnings they came from. So anyway, plain folks, it portrays someone that's a perceived authority as just like a regular Joe.
Yeah, just like us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in card stacking, and that's kind of like what you're talking about with Goebbels. Selecting data, only presenting the data that are favorable to that particular cause.
Yeah, like they said, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
But like, I forget what Olympics it was now, but Nazi Germany was basically like, our blonde hair, blue eyed, whatever, are going to dominate the Olympics.
Right.
And then they went there, and the Olympics were, you could see them, everybody could see them. And then Jesse Owens,
right?
Absolutely, you could literally see Hitler being like devastated,
right?
So that was like almost like they were like, no, there's no chance we can lose any events. And then Jesse Owens is like
mopping them up,
just destroying everybody. So it was like, that's fun to watch. I don't know if you saw those old videos where he's like in this, and you're like, somebody's geting killed over this for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure someone did get killed. Some coach or trainer.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's one of my favorite things because like they had all this propaganda, and I almost guarantee everybody's like, we're going to win every event by a mile in the Olympics. And then Jesse Owens is like, I don't think so. Yeah, just runs past everybody.
So some early examples, and when I say early, I mean like way back in history, and it's just kind of walking the dog on some classic examples just to broaden our definition of it.
Sure.
So ancient Egypt. The pharaohs, they built these monuments and these grand, the pyramids, all of that sort of thing with inscriptions. And the whole idea of that is to, it's something grand. You got all the people working on it, and it identifies them as this powerful godlike figure.
I was gonna comment on that the easiest one throughout history is that whoever your leader was, they are as close to godlike as possible. Yeah. Yeah. Like they're infallible. They can't bleed. You can't
question them.
Yeah, you cannot question. Obviously,
right?
Obviously, can't question them. That's what they said in. This is a terrible reference. I'm about to dumb down what you said, but like in the movie 300, do you see that?
Oh, I love that movie.
I mean, it's great.
Absolutely love that.
That's based on a true story, the Battle of Thermopylae. But he said, "I'm going to show everybody that even a god can bleed."
Yeah,
that's kind of like what that is. It's like everybody thinks he's a god because he's made it that way. It's basically just old school propaganda, the original propaganda.
Yeah. That is a great movie, and I think we were going to talk about that at some point in the future, weren't we? That battle.
I think the Battle of Thermopylae.
Yeah,
that's a fantastic story.
It is an awesome story. And just that, just quick sidebar, but just the way of war of that was in Athens.
Yep.
Was a new way to do things.
Right.
And we'll talk about that later. I've done a lot of reading on that. So anyway, ancient Greece. So both sides of the Peloponnesian War, you had the Athens and Sparta. That's another group I was talking about. Sparta.
This is Sparta.
That's right.
Yep.
But they both used, Sparta and Athens both used propaganda to favor their cause, and that's to get people behind. It's more of a patriotic appeal.
Yep.
So is that good or bad? Well, I think it's good to rally your folks.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think specifically like the old way of doing things, the movie Troy does a really good job of that story. Achilles, basically everybody thought he was this unkillable man, and that was like propaganda. They were like, you don't want to fight Achilles, and they literally said that when he would take the battlefield that the troops would be rallied because they thought of him as like basically this unkillable soldier, basically, which is in that time frame.
Yeah, exactly. Except he had to heal.
If his mom had just dipped him the whole way and stopped being a dummy. Anyway.
So the Roman Empire, similar to Egypt, where you have these grand buildings and statues and monuments to these Caesars or to these rulers, especially after the Senate basically became devolved, and Caesar took over, and then there were a series of Caesars after him,
Right.
and similar to the Egyptians.
Yep.
So another one that's interesting, and I did a little digging on this further, just because I found it interesting, was the Battle of Hastings. So if you remember the Battle of Hastings, that's when the Normans, there was a king of England, and he died, and then because William the Conqueror, and over in France, he was promised, he said, the throne, and so they didn't give it to him, so he goes over to take over, and so that was a monumental. The Normans occupied for about 90 years, 80 to 90 years, something like that. And but anyway, he had a tapestry.
The Tapestry of Bayeux.
Yes, that's right. Tell us about that.
I don't remember now, but that's depicted,
awesome.
It depicted a battle. Correct?
Right.
Yeah. I don't remember exact specific, but
And so it highlights their feats and solidifies his rightful, because hey, here's a battle.
Heir to the throne.
I took over.
Yep.
And I won the battle.
God, I don't know how I pulled that out of my brain.
That's legit.
Yeah.
We had to just stop right there.
I mean, I'm probably going to retire from whatever I'm doing right now. That's it. That's the highlight of my life.
That's awesome. The American Revolution. So there was a lot of propaganda now, because now we're talking, this is post Johann Gutenberg with the printing press. So you've got newsprint, you've got cartoons that you can print. You're not working with stone tablets anymore, or tapestries.
Yeah.
So if you recall some popular or some renowned propaganda, Join or Die. You remember seeing that?
Yep.
And Common Sense by Thomas Paine, a book.
I remember that. Yep.
It's a great book to read. Imagery of the Boston Tea Party.
Imagery of the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, because a lot of paintings, descriptions of it, because of this, throwing the king's tea into the harbor at Boston. It was a thumb in the eye of the British, and then the Liberty Tree symbolism.
I don't know that either. The Liberty Tree symbolism.
Yeah, Liberty Tree.
Oh, I gotcha. I understand.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
like you got to kill tyrants to feed the tree.
I found out recently that a lot of those guys that started our country, like Benjamin Franklin, all these dudes, they would write under surnames. Or
Publius.
Yes, so they didn't get in trouble by the king. They could write and basically at least critiques of the king or things that the king wouldn't like, and they had to write under false names too. Basically, what they were relating it to is it's like what do you call it when somebody's like on Twitter and they have like a face
an anonymous.
Like anonymous. What do you call those people like that are like getting everything stirred up? Trolls.
Yeah.
They were the original trolls.
They were trolls.
Yeah, they were the original trolls.
Because they could have been hung for treason.
Yep, and they were getting people fired up about it.
Yeah. So in that case, I mean, I would say that that's good propaganda because it stirred the people up. There wasn't a huge amount of people that were that in favor of declaring independence. But there was a very vocal minority that were very focused and very they were very fiery, and they essentially made it happen.
Yep.
Now they had the backing of the people because there were different congresses and that were meeting in these states or in the colonies then. But anyway, that was the role of propaganda in the American Revolution.
I heard a funny joke the other day that England blew a 13-0 colony lead.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Some other historical uses, the World Wars. So World War I and II, everybody was using propaganda because now you're talking newspapers are prolific, and you had they had wire then, right? Yeah, they had wire because they were able to telegraph things, information. So propaganda is now becoming a little more mature and a little more diverse, with everybody getting the information rather than just a town crier reading information, a proclamation from the king, or this tapestry that's they just rolled it into town.
I have some good propaganda. Well, I view it as good propaganda. When Chris Kyle, you familiar with that story? That American sniper.
Yep.
He was like, I forget what his name was, but they had a bounty on his head, in Afghanistan, because he had like this symbol on his arm and the tattoo on his arm.
Oh, I think I remember something about this.
Yeah, and so they called him, like, I forget what they call him now, I'm blanking, but his units were with him. They basically like boasted him up because they were like, this guy is, he
will reach out and touch you.
He'll reach out and get you every time. And then on top of that is that when he was on Overwatch for like the Marines, they basically thought they were untouchable.
Yeah.
They thought that they couldn't get injured with Chris Kyle up there because he had like so many confirmed kills, and it was like he was unstoppable. So when he did his second or third tour, they literally handed him a flyer from there, and they were like, there's like a $500,000 bounty on your head.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Yeah, so they use it to their advantage on that one.
Yeah. And turned it.
Yeah. And basically, we're like, this is great. It's even better.
Yeah.
Because now they're afraid that you're out there.
So that's some historical uses. World Wars, we talked about that. And the purpose was to boost morale, demoralize enemies, recruit. You remember Uncle Sam?
Mm-hmm.
That's where he comes from. It's World War I.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To try to recruit folks for that cause. Not that many people were enthused about going to fight in Europe.
Yeah.
Why do we need to send troops to Europe? And there was a whole lot of consternation about sending troops to Europe, and rightfully so. Why do we need to send?
Yeah.
Europe has been fighting as long as there's been Europe.
Right.
And so why would we need to send our boys over there?
Right.
And I have opinions about that are neither here nor there at this stage. But bottom line is the U.S. used propaganda.
Yeah.
And World War I too, or also World War II also.
Yeah, World War I, and then World War II.
Yes,
gotcha.
And the Nazis were good at the visual propaganda.
Well, I think that was different because that was starting to get in the age of where you had things that you could see, like, more visual stuff, like reach more people.
And you have movies
and TV, and maybe not TV, but you had like a way to reach people, a broader audience with easier, I should say. Yeah.
So the next one I'm going to talk about is the Cold War. And this is where we're talking, there's a significant jump. And that matured. We talked a little bit about World War II with the technological advances of being able to play movies, World War II and slightly beyond. TV wasn't prolific yet. It was possible, but it wasn't prolific. But you could gather people in the movie theater and play movies, or they were coming to watch to be entertained. And then so you'd have a quick movie about, from Uncle Sam, from the government, to let's raise some money for the war bonds.
Yeah.
Because we were paying for wars with bonds, raising bonds.
Gotcha.
And not just taxing everybody to death.
Not just sometimes you have a $6 billion accounting error. That you
Sometimes you do.
I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens to me all the time.
So the Cold War, this is where it's a step function different because now TV is prolific, and you have a couple other things that are going on. In fact, I'll just jump to that right now. So there was. Have you ever heard of the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948?
No, I haven't. Smith-Mundt, no.
It's Smith, the typical spelling, and M-U-N-D-T. It's there were two guys that sponsored a bill that became an act and then signed into law by Harry S. Truman in 1948. So if you recall, this is post-World War II, and there was the Red Scare. There was communism. Hey, they're taking over. They're moving into Hungary. They're doing this. They're doing that. So there was a lot of effort to propagandize because we saw the effectiveness of it during World Wars I and II. We see the technology now is maturing, so we can do other things. And so the Smith-Mundt Act, it was to use propaganda through other departmental agencies, like the State Department, to propagandize other governments.
Sure.
Because what we wanted to do, the USSR, this is post-Russia the first, and now pre-Russia now, but the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It was a communist country, and they had taken over much of Eastern Europe post-World War II. And so we were at loggerheads. Europe was pretty much split, and communism was spreading. China was going on, and they were advancing into the Far East. So between the U.S. and the Soviets, there was a whole lot of propaganda.
Right.
Again, that was to try to influence other people in these other nations to choose the side that they wanted,
right?
Whether it was the Soviets or the U.S. But that Smith-Mundt Act prohibited the dissemination of propaganda within the United States.
Okay.
So it outlawed in the United States. And if you think about it, it makes sense because, fundamentally, if you think about our nation, the government shouldn't be in the business of developing propaganda within the United States to influence because we're supposed to have a free press, right?
Right.
That's the assumption going in, that the government shouldn't be in the media business.
Yeah.
And so why would we have propaganda here? So anyway, so just think about that, and then let's pause for just a second. We'll talk about totalitarian governments. There's a lot of totalitarian regimes. So at the time, during the Cold War, there were a lot of nation states that were pro-Soviet, and they were like really, so they were controlled de facto by the Soviets. Same thing with the U.S. And that's when NATO was created and all that. And same thing with China, North Korea, and there was a proxy war in Korea between the communists and the Free United States. And it got divided into two different nations, which still exist. And there were other nations that were kind of in that limbo, but they were kind of, they were reliable to both maybe, and sworn to neither.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of totalitarian states. And so since they were kind of friendly to both, a lot of guys were able to maintain power, and they didn't give it up.
Right.
And they were effective users of propaganda. And so they used this to control their population. They denounced dissent. They minimized opponents, controlled opinions, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So let me fast forward a bit, and this will be more of an open discussion. So the Smith-Mundt Act, exporting propaganda to foreign nations in order to win favor for our cause.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the government shouldn't have a role in media, which is correct. Who decides what's propaganda? Who gets to make that decision?
I think we do.
So we
as individuals.
We the people. But how do you stop it then? Like that, does that act make sense? Because you can't, it's an opinion, right? I mean, it's ultimately an opinion. I believe that Hitler thought what he thought was right. So to him, it may not have been propaganda.
Right.
So, but to us it is. So if a news organization is putting out what we consider propaganda, like, is this Smith-Mundt Act still in effect?
More than that in a second, but let me answer your question.
Sorry.
So propaganda, what the Smith-Mundt Act prevented was these government agencies and departments from using our media within the United States on U.S. citizens.
Okay, so then let me ask you this. With the Twitter files and them reaching into Twitter and telling them to block people, isn't that, because that is, it's social media.
Yeah.
It's media. It's media still. It's how people get information.
Yeah.
So isn't that in direct conflict of that?
100%.
Yeah,
1,000%.
1,000%.
1,000%. So it's funny you bring that up, although we've been nibbling at the cookie.
Yeah.
So you're not going to believe this. So
Okay.
The Smith-Mundt Act, you remember, we've been beating that horse to death. So in 2012, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was passed as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, and it lifted the prohibition of domestic propaganda.
Oh, so now they can do it.
Now they can do it.
Oh, that's good. I was worried they wouldn't be able to. That's good.
Yeah, it's working out well.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and we can discuss this a little bit. Why in the world, if we have a free press,
Yeah.
right? And so if I say if we have a free press and it's necessary to a free people, right? That's kind of I'm kind of borrowing words from the First Amendment. It's necessary for freedom to have a free press, and there's a lot of good quotes online from the founders on that. So the media, that assumes that the media are not associated with the government in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
They're not taking direction from the government. And so why would you have to have a prohibition about something in the form of the Smith-Mundt Act that says, okay, Department of State or the CIA or Department of Defense, whatever, fill in the blank, doesn't matter. They are not allowed to go to CBS, let's say, and here's a check for $1 million, make a video that's in favor of whatever policy that we're going to pass or whatever thing. We should be nervous about that.
Yeah.
We should be really, really nervous about that.
Is there anything that prevented like a by proxy, like somebody in the government getting somebody else to pay somebody to put propaganda in there? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't think only if they're found out. Because then if the government is actually, that's the trouble with a free society. The people have to pay attention to what's going on.
Like, I'm pretty sure that something's going to happen with specifically social media soon.
Yes.
Like it's a it's a utility that everybody deserves because it's available, and that the government should have no effect on that utility.
Zero effect.
So I think there's going to be something that happens soon within the near future that is going to, because if you looked into the Twitter files, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. Like what they said was, hey, what are you going to do about this person? Like meaning like you need to silence this person.
Right. It was very clear what they were implying.
And people say like, well, there should be some moderation because people are crazy, right? Like because people are going to say some banana stuff. But I don't know where so you have to almost let those crazy people say their crazy stuff, and then we decide what's crazy. Like there's a million people on YouTube that are like the Earth is flat, right?
That's what they say.
So are we gonna kick them off,
right?
Or do we just does it matter?
Let it go.
I mean, isn't that what like parents and teachers and all those people are for, to like educate people on what what certain things are.
What parents are responsible for teaching their children, and they co-opt that to schools most of the time, 95% of the time. But to answer your question and to kind of further this discussion, the government should have no say in who is a media, who is the press.
Right.
Zero say. Because once they do that, once they say, oh, well, they're not a real media person.
Right.
Well, if they can regulate that, it's no different than saying, well, you have to pass a certain criteria in order to possess a firearm.
Right. Which I think the Supreme Court just said
you can't.
You can carry. It's unconstitutional.
It is.
Now. Yeah.
It is absolutely unconstitutional.
Yeah. It's pretty.
And it was unconstitutional before they said that.
Yeah.
Because remember, things can be legal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
And we have a fundamental right to defend ourselves. I posit that, and I'll say that.
That was a pretty big deal.
It was a huge deal.
That was a pretty big
and
deal.
I'm glad they did it.
Yeah.
So if the government can say who is a media person.
Yeah.
And they have been saying that essentially with the big three networks in the U.S. and then really there's only 6 entertainment media conglomerates, and then everything else is just kind of superfluous and they're kind of suppressed.
Right.
If they can dictate that, and according to this 2012 that was signed into law by then President Obama, that says, well, we can broadcast propaganda. There's no prohibition.
Yeah.
So that means the government agency, the EPA, the CDC, the National Health Institutes, the medical officer for the state of Alabama, you fill in the blank. They can go to the media. It's legal to do this and say, we need you to broadcast some information. And because the rationale behind that getting signed into law is the proliferation of the internet and social media, because now people like you and me can have a blog.
Right.
And we can say, you know what, I know what the guy the guy that reads the news on the television, what he said, but I disagree. Well, now we can try to control those people like you and me that might have a podcast.
Right.
And so that was really the purpose of doing that.
Yeah.
That's what I posit. I could be wrong, and I'd like to hear your feedback.
Well, what do I want to say here? So YouTube obviously also has a problem. So here's the bananas thing. I don't know how deep in the weeds you want to get in this, but RFK has had a bunch of podcasts pulled from YouTube.
Yes.
And so a lot of people that are not necessarily
podcasts and just statements.
Yes.
Yeah.
So but I guess it's a monetary thing. So it's bullying basically by YouTube. So what it's saying is this guy has a really successful podcast. I'll just give you a perfect example. This guy's a comedian. He's a very successful podcast. It's how he makes his money mostly. So, and he has mostly comedians on, but every once in a while he'll interview somebody different. Well, so they had RFK on. He had RFK on, and they pulled his episode. That means all the money he gets for that episode is gone as well. So it makes him afraid to do that ever again.
Right.
And that's what it comes. That's what it comes from. Here's my stance on it. If you don't like RFK and you don't believe what he's saying, I wouldn't listen to the podcast he's on.
Right.
I would just avoid or click next or skip it. I don't think he can say whatever he wants. People say crazy stuff on the internet all the time.
Right.
So I don't know what
we've said some crazy stuff.
I say if you hear Reaching for the Bars podcast, I say crazy stuff all the time, but I think it's funny. So it's not meant to be anything, but like he has a belief, and everybody's afraid to do the actual thing. And it's not just him. Everybody's afraid to do the real thing, which is if you truly think that he's wrong, then somebody from your side sit down and debate him.
Right.
That's what everybody's afraid to do.
Like who's that physician that has been calling out Joe Rogan for having
Dr. Peter Hotez.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Hotez. So, and that's kind of what I'm saying is like, if you truly think this dude is wrong, and you think that you have the facts to prove that he's wrong, sit down
and discuss
globally.
Yeah.
And if you're so right, if you think that you're so right and that he is so wrong, you should have no problem debating him.
Or let's say you're not comfortable in like this quote unquote formal debate that's televised via some kind of social media thing.
Yeah.
We'll have we'll broker a discussion between, let's say, Joe Rogan or anybody.
Yeah.
And this guy's going to kind of moderate it, and we won't record it live.
Yeah.
And then you can give it the thumbs up at the end of it. That way, if you start misspeak, and you can take your time.
Yeah.
And formulate your responses and just have a discussion about it. But it's fear, and it goes back to the definitions of propaganda and the purpose, the intent of propaganda.
Because you lose, if you said X, Y, and Z during a certain time, and then you have a guy that totally blows you up, then everybody loses confidence in you, which now you're totally afraid of.
Yeah.
Because you know that guy, you may be right on something, but if he blows you up on something that is a big deal, people are going to remember that, which happens a lot. There's a guy, have you ever heard of Graham Hancock?
No.
So he believes there was a cataclysm 11,000 years ago, and he's done some archaeological digs. Whether you think that happened or not is irrelevant. What I'm trying to say is he thinks here's my evidence, and I will debate any mainstream archaeologist at any point. And they've tried to get people to debate him.
And they don't.
And they won't. They're so afraid to look stupid. They're so afraid to look silly in the limelight. But this guy's like, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I have plenty of data, and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with this. Like, I would literally pay money to watch Peter Hotez and RFK.
Oh, I would too.
I would pay the money.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%. Just for the fact that it's going to be like this guy who hasn't really been questioned in 5 years is about to have somebody right in front of him literally questioning everything he says.
Right.
And it's going to, he's a fat guy. He's going to be sweating. He's going to be like dabbing his face, like pouring like the guys in Congress, like pouring water and like drinking it, like next question, like that kind of thing. So
doing a lot of this.
Yeah. Talking to his lawyer. Talking to his lawyer. Can I say this? Yeah. So, I mean, that's the way around this crap is like, but we need people like him. Whether you agree with him or not, you need people like that go against the status quo and be like, hey, this crap is wrong. And if somebody wants to debate me, we can debate. And there's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
The people that are like, I don't want to debate are the people that you should be scared about.
That's right.
Right. I mean, that's what I think.
1,000%.
1,000%.
And that's what the founders had in mind when they described this Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, and when they describe the press, we automatically think of the press as this credentialed elite group of journalism school graduates.
Right.
And that's not it.
Right.
It's people willing to write and record what they saw and try to, as dispassionately as they can, describe what they saw, and broadcast that in whatever media is possible at the time. So if it's stone tablets, if it's papyrus, if it's paper, if it's a computer, if it's my phone, or if it's word of mouth, then I am, like by definition, we are the press, you and I, because we're talking about topics.
Yeah.
Some would call us propagandists, but I would love to have someone on and say, okay, well, let's talk about whatever subject I've talked about, and we'll discuss it.
Yep.
And at the end of it, we'll shake hands and call it a day, and you can make up your own mind. I don't care.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can walk away. And I think there's like a weird thing where people think that you have to you're going to sway somebody to your side in a debate, or you're going to do something. Like, that's not the case.
No.
People could talk for an hour and not change one stance. That's not what it's about.
But the observer could.
Yeah. So that's really what the important part is. And like, don't you think that it was like almost, I don't know if I want to use the word regal, but like maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like the dudes that were the broadcasters, or like the like Walter Cronkite, those guys were like revered because you felt like you were getting the news, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like what it was?
That's what it was.
Yeah. And now it's like a little bit more like,
And I'm suspicious of that. I don't know if that was, I'm suspicious, and I think it's dubious for us to assume that they were as dispassionate as they were portrayed.
Yeah.
The Walter Cronkites, the Peter Jennings, the Tom Brokaws, the John Chancellors, the David Brinkleys. Was it as dispassionate and even-handed delivery of the news, or was it propaganda?
The hard thing is now is that we can look immediately and see if there's something askew. like with internet.
Yeah.
So like if like a lot of people would just take it at their word. So you're right. You may be right that maybe that's not the case. It's just that we have way more access to information immediately. So we could look up and be like, is that true?
Right.
Did that really happen? And there's websites and search engines now that you can search
and
without.
books.
Yeah. I mean, like Google, like they filter stuff so you can't search certain things.
Right.
There's like search engines now that don't do that. So
Yeah.
you can if you were really interested in finding what's going on, you could, really look. So it makes it a big difference between now and then. But I guess I meant like, you don't trust anybody now in the news, really. I mean, if you sit down, you're like, these guys are telling me the 100% truth. I mean, I don't think anybody is.
Have you seen that clip where someone takes they take a series of local news broadcasts where the anchors are standing there, and it starts off with one, and they're all the different networks.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It's all Fox, CBS, ABC, NBC, the big ones that you think of.
Yep.
CNN, or actually not CNN because they don't have local affiliates, but it's just the 2 or 3 anchors for the news, and they say the same lines
Yep.
over and over about this is a threat to our democracy.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah, and it's basically asserting that dominance that you cannot trust these people unless you are like us, and
Right.
it comes from us. But the thing is, they aggregate all of these individuals, and they're saying identical things.
Yeah.
And when you have that many people saying identical things,
Mm-hmm.
and you heard me a couple episodes ago. Whenever a large group is going that way,
Yeah. You want to
let's go. I'm like, okay, there's a reason why they are now motivated to go that way, and I am suspicious of what motivated them.
Yeah, that's right.
Automatically.
Yeah. I always think it's also important for like, so YouTube is heavily scrutinized. Like they internally scrutinize stuff, but I think it's so important for these little pop-ups that try to compete with it and say that you can do whatever you want on here.
Like Rumble. Rumble's
Rumble.
yeah.
I think that's so important. Even if they don't, they're like, oh, it'll never amount to anything. Well, it doesn't have to. You just have to you have to threaten them to be like, we're not going to.
It's like any other
Yeah,
competition.
it's like we're not going to let it be that way. I think those are super important. And then you are going to get, so there is a valid argument. There's going to be people that are say some of the wildest stuff you've ever seen. Like that's just, you're like 100. I hear you.
That's exactly what should happen.
I hear you, but it's so just because somebody says something to me doesn't mean I have to accept it as the truth.
Right.
I can just be like, that's some nonsense. I don't have to listen to it.
Right.
So
Or I just disagree and then get on with your day.
But they're talking about like the people that argue it are talking about the wildest outside of the realm stuff. Like, what if people said this? It's like, okay, well, you don't have to believe it.
Right.
In fact, you can just write it off as nonsense and never have to listen to them again. But in our country, they're allowed to say it. They can say it.
And they should be able to say it.
They should be allowed to say it.
So let me go through these ways to detect propaganda, and we talked about a lot of these along the way. Question the source, and so you got to ask for the sauce. Yeah, what's your proof? Well, you said this. Like, what's your background? What are you saying here?
Right.
You look for emotional appeals. If someone's using an emotional appeal to you, you got to start questioning like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Check for cherry-picked info. Verify facts. Consider the language. If you hear, there are a lot of key buzzwords these days that are now like verboten. You can't say this word. You can't say that word. You can't say these things right now.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
It's offensive. Okay. Again, back to a free media, a free press.
Right.
ID missing context, identify missing context, and recognize the fear tactics. If they're using fear to manipulate you, and it should be pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Like if you don't do this, if you don't cower in fear and walk this way wherever the grocery store lines say, then you're gonna die.
That's right.
And I didn't die, and I didn't follow the arrows.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because most people that didn't follow the arrows died immediately. So it's amazing that you were able to. That's a real story, a real victory story that you're able to make it.
Propaganda.
Yeah. Do you hear about I don't want to. I guess I shouldn't say his name. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's a very famous country singer.
Oh, Jason Aldean.
No, not him. But he is.
I jumped the gun.
He is very famous. That is a very famous. He's a new guy, Morgan Wallen. You never heard him?
I'm not a fan of country and Western music.
He is going crazy right now. Like all of his stuff is like out of control. Like he is. If you looked at Spotify, I mean, just an absurd amount of millions of listens. But somebody found a video where he used a racial slur to his friends, and not at somebody, not like a negative. Like I mean, people viewed it as negative. And people were like, this is why it's so funny. People were like, cancel him now. He needs to never sing country music. but he's so good at singing country music that everybody was like, no, we love him. He's awesome.
Yeah.
And they just kind of like, they breeze past it. So, like, cause everybody, the initial response is that, well, he'll never work again. But he was so good at what he did that people just kind of breeze through it. That's why I'm hopeful that this stuff is like, is going to
wear and thin.
I
think more and more people are waking up to, they get weary of being told that, no, you can't do this. You can't say that. You can't think that. And,
it's hard to keep
and I'm
track.
not saying that there should be no limits to decorum. There should be a certain amount. Like if I were to go out, and say offensive things to people, I should be shunned for that. But that's a societal thing, not a government thing.
I was going to say that's like a personal thing. If you don't want to be, you want to be well respected. You're not going to go out and just offend people for no reason. And I think that's what the issue is. It's like, somebody didn't say something to offend somebody. You shouldn't have control over that. If somebody's going to be a jerk, they're going to be a jerk whether you tell them not to be a jerk or not.
Right.
I mean,
and it shouldn't be up to YouTube to demonetize.
Right.
Although if they're a private company, that's where it gets kind of squishy. If someone's a private company, can they state the rules and say, well, we're not going to monetize some offensive content? That's fair. But then we should look to YouTube if they are not doing the same rule to everybody.
Right, correct. Like if you think there can be propaganda or misinformation on one side, it can be on the other as well. And both need to be
evenly played.
Yeah, correct.
Otherwise, we'll vote by going to Rumble.
Right, correct. Yeah. If you get to a certain point, people are just going to be like, okay, well, I got to go over here.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's all I had on propaganda. Hope you enjoyed it.
It was a very lively discussion.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. It was fun.
So research Smith-Mundt Act.
Yep.
And the Modernization Act. It's just really interesting. In my research, the folks were de-emphasizing that modernization part. Like, well, some will say this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But then if you start putting some clues together, it seems pretty obvious what was going on.
Right.
And personally, I don't like the Modernization Act. The government should not be in the business of sanctioning propaganda.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's just me. I hope you enjoyed it. We would enjoy your feedback. Please continue to like and subscribe.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, we're going to get into the propaganda business pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. We're going to start giving you some very interesting propaganda about our podcast. Adam has hit over 1,000-foot home run, which is pretty impressive. He's one of the strongest people I know. I've ran a 2.5-minute mile.
That's right.
No need to fact check it. It's real.
True. I was there.
Yeah, I chased after the ball that he hit. That's how we did it. So, but no, this was super fun. I appreciated it. Good episode.
Yeah. So we'll see you next time, and stay fresh, cheese bags.
Stay fresh.